Welcome to a new Word Power episode from English Plus Podcast. This is your host Danny, and today we're going to talk about Zlata Filipovic and her diary, which talks about a child's life in Sarajevo. And of course, it is a great story that you need to know about, but don't forget that we are going to learn 10 new words in context. And let me tell you about these 10 words that we're going to learn in today's story, Zlata's diary, a child's life in Sarajevo. These words are ethnic, incessant, atrocity, baleful, contending, mean, engaging, disconsolate, memoir, and audacious. All these words we're going to learn in context, and that's going to happen next, so don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Now, before I start, let me remind you that you can practice everything we're going to learn in today's episode on the website. The link is right in the show notes. You can take the link, go to the website after you listen to the episode, and practice to your heart's content. I created different kinds of practice to suit your preference. There is interactive practice, digital practice that you can do on the website without the need of pen and paper if you prefer that. And there's also a PDF practice worksheet that you can download and practice. And the PDF is special because it does not only have practice for today's episode, but also there's a part where you can review the words you learned in the previous 4 Word Power episodes. Are you interested yet? I hope you are. So let's dive right into today's Word Power episode, Zlata's Diary, a child's life in Sarajevo. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. Late in 1991, Zlata Filipovic, a 10-year-old Bosnian girl of mixed ethnic heritage, began keeping a diary. For 2 years, through the destruction of her native Sarajevo and an atmosphere of incessant fear, she wrote about the mounting atrocities of a war she could not comprehend. Having read Anne Frank's diary of a young girl, Zlata decided to imitate her role model by writing to an imaginary friend, Mimi, about the start of an ordinary school year, piano lessons, and tennis. However, this sheltered, peaceful life soon became balefully dramatic. Rumors of war filtered in from Slovenia and Croatia, and by the spring of 1992, Sarajevo was under siege. Zlata's entries are filled with details about the hardships of hiding in basement shelters, contending with shortages of food, water, electricity, and fuel, and trying to maintain a mean of normality while friends go into exile and artillery shells shatter her apartment windows. The utter ordinariness of Zlata's impression is what makes her diary heartrending. In one section, she notes that the streets are full of abandoned purebred dogs. In another, she realizes that since the war began, she has outgrown her clothes. She is torn between pleasure and guilt as she discovers a whole new wardrobe in an apartment vacated by her neighbors. Her report of a cancelled field trip to a concert is matter of fact. Since there would be 10,000 children there, a teacher fears that some group might plant a bomb or take them all hostage. Zlata's writing is engaging and compelling as she tries to keep her spirits up. Only occasionally does she sound disconsolate, as when her friend Nina is killed by a shell. Zlata grows from an innocent child to a maturing adolescent during the course of her diary. She begins self-consciously as a little girl, confiding all to her best friend. By the end of her memoir, however, she has become perceptive and even audacious, as when she scornfully comments on politicians. And here I quote from what she said. "It's a war between idiots. Ordinary people don't want this division because it won't make anyone happy. Not the Serbs, not the Croats, not the Muslims. But who asks ordinary people? Politics only asks its own people." End quote. The existence of Zlata's diary first became public when parts were published in a Croatian edition by UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. Months later, a French photographer took a copy of the diary to Paris, where an interested publisher pressured authorities into helping Zlata and her parents immigrate to France. The book was an instant bestseller in France and the United States, and some of the profits from its sales have been donated to war relief. So, that was the story of this extraordinary girl who actually grew up writing this diary and changed a lot. And of course, the atrocities of war changed her a lot, changed her perception of life and everything that is happening around her. Now, I would love to say that this is just a lesson from the past and we don't have these stories anymore, but you and I both know that these stories are still happening every day. And I'm not taking sides or whatever, because it's impossible to know what's happening behind the curtains. There is no way you can tell who's right and who's wrong, but I know for sure that I take side with those innocent people that are killed every day in a war they don't comprehend, just as Zlata when she was a girl. But that aside, let's move on and let's start talking about the words that we're going to learn from today's story of Zlata's diary. Remember, these words are ethnic, incessant, atrocity, baleful, contending, mean, engaging, disconsolate, memoir, and audacious. So, are you ready to start talking about the very first word for today's episode, and that is ethnic? That's coming next, so don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. So let's start with the very first word, ethnic. E-T-H-N-I-C, ethnic. Let's remember how we used that in context. We said, late in 1991, Zlata Filipovic, a 10-year-old Bosnian girl of mixed ethnic heritage, began keeping a diary. So, what do we mean when we talk about ethnic? Something that is ethnic can best be explained as what? Can be explained as relating to the height to which something is elevated, can be explained as relating to groups of people with a common racial, national, religious, or cultural heritage? Can it be explained as derived from a prototype or earlier form? Or can it be described as having mental skill? So, which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought that ethnic can be best explained as relating to groups of people with a common racial, national, religious, or cultural heritage, you're absolutely right. You can use ethnic to describe people who belong to a particular racial or cultural group, but who usually do not live in the country where most members of that group live. Remember, that usually do not live. Doesn't mean that they don't live at all, but usually live in another country. In a country where most people belong to a different racial or cultural group. And here, remember, when we talked about Zlata, we said that she was a 10-year-old Bosnian girl of mixed ethnic heritage. So she does not belong to one ethnic heritage, but mixed ethnic heritage. But our word ethnic, that's what we need to understand, and that's what we just talked about. And of course, ethnic can be used for other things as well. Not only for belonging to a particular racial or cultural group, we can talk about ethnic clothing, music, or food. And ethnic clothing, music, or food is characteristic of the traditions of a particular ethnic group, and different from what is usually found in modern Western culture. So, that was our very first word, ethnic. I hope you like the word. I hope you can find a place for this word in your active vocabulary bank. And remember, you can do that by practicing using these words. And practicing these words is very easy because you can take the link you can find in the description. Go to my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. It will take you to the custom post I created for this episode where you can practice to your heart's content. And now, let's move on to talk about the next word, incessant. I-N-C-E-S-S-A-N-T. Let's remember how we use that in context. We said, for 2 years, through the destruction of her native Sarajevo and an atmosphere of incessant fear, she wrote about the mounting atrocities of a war she could not comprehend. So here our word is incessant. Now, which word or words do you think could best replace incessant in this context? Could we replace it with unnecessary, foolish, sufficient, or continuing without interruption? Which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought continuing without interruption is the answer, you're absolutely right. An incessant process or activity is one that continues without stopping. And we usually use it for something negative. It doesn't have to be negative, but usually we use it for something that you don't like. Incessant fear, incessant war, incessant killing, incessant murders, etc. So we don't usually use it for incessant happiness. But the point is that incessant means something that continues without stopping. And that was our second word, and of course not the last. Within the same context, we talked about another word, atrocity. A-T-R-O-C-I-T-Y, atrocity. Now let me remind you again how we use that in context. We said for 10 years, through the destruction of her native Sarajevo and an atmosphere of incessant fear, she wrote about the mounting atrocities of a war she could not comprehend. So here we're talking about atrocities. How can we best explain this word? Can we explain atrocities as appalling cruelties? Can we explain it as trivial situations, as specified periods of time, or as extreme feelings of fatigue? Which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought appalling cruelties, you're absolutely right. An atrocity is a very cruel and shocking action. It is something that should never happen, but it is something that happens all the time in wars, unfortunately. And I'm ashamed to say that this is a fact of life. It is really shameful to admit that these things are normal. These atrocities happen in war, and we have to accept them. I have absolutely no idea how people can accept. But if you ever read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, you will understand what happens. After you do something wrong for the first time, maybe you will cry. But then you will start to adapt, and later on you accept it, and even at some time you embrace it. Well, if you haven't read this great book, I believe you should, because I believe it's one of the books that you must read before you die. But anyway, let's not get too dramatic about that. But our word is absolutely dramatic. An atrocity, remember, is a very cruel, shocking action. All right? And now let's move on to the next word, which is also a negative word. And this word is baleful. B-A-L-E-F-U-L. Now let's remember how we use that in context. We said, having read Anne Frank's diary of a young girl, Zlata decided to imitate her role model by writing to an imaginary friend, Mimi, about the start of an ordinary school year, piano lessons and tennis. However, this sheltered, peaceful life soon became balefully dramatic. Balefully dramatic. So my question here is, which word could best replace balefully in this context? Could we replace it with unproductively? Could we replace it with quietly? Could we replace it with threateningly? Or could we replace it with joyfully? Which word do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those who thought threateningly is the right answer, you're absolutely right. Baleful means harmful or expressing harmful intentions. So something dangerous, something frightening, something threatening, menacing. That's the meaning of baleful. And that is our word, but not the last word for today's episode. Remember, we still have a few more words to cover. And our very next word is contending. C-O-N-T-E-N-D-I-N-G, contending. Let's remember how we use that in context. We said, Zlata's entries are filled with details about the hardships of hiding in basement shelters, contending with shortages of food, water, electricity, and fuel, and trying to maintain a mean of normality while friends go into exile and artillery shells shatter her apartment windows. So, the word is contending. Now, my question to you is, which word or words could best replace contending in this context? Could we replace contending with moving rapidly, with releasing, with struggling, or with consuming entirely? Which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought struggling is the right answer, you're absolutely right. If you have to contend with a problem or difficulty, you have to deal with it or overcome it, although it is very difficult. You have to struggle. So that is the meaning, contending with shortages of food, water, electricity, and fuel. So these shortages of food, water, electricity, and fuel, and other things, of course, and the dangers, obviously, trying to maintain this normal life, which is close to impossible in these situations in a war, trying to deal with these things is a big challenge. You have to struggle. And this is the meaning of the word contend. You have to contend with a problem or difficulty. That means you have to deal with it or overcome it. And that was our word. And within the same context, we used another word, which is mean. And mean here, it's not M-E-A-N, it is M-I-E-N. But it is pronounced the same, mean. But remember, it is spelled M-I-E-N, mean. Let's remember again how we used that in context. We said Zlata's entries are filled with details about the hardships of hiding in basement shelters, contending with shortages of food, water, electricity, and fuel, and trying to maintain a mean of normality while friends go into exile and artillery shells shatter her apartment windows. So here, when we talk about mean, M-I-E-N, how can we best describe this word? Can we describe it as means of support, as casual reference, as behavior, or as appearance? So which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought appearance is the right answer, you're right. Someone's mean is their general appearance and manner, especially the expression on their face, which shows what they are feeling or thinking. So it's not just the appearance. We're not just talking about how you look, but also reading the expressions that you have on your face that may tell us how you feel or think. Because remember, in context, how we use that, trying to maintain a mean of normality, an appearance of normality. While friends go into exile and artillery shells shatter her apartment windows. That was difficult. She had to contend with these difficulties. Remember, contending? She had to contend. She had to struggle. So we had our words, contending and now mean. Let's move on to another word, and this word is positive. It is engaging. E-N-G-A-G-I-N-G, engaging. Let's see how we use that in context. We said, Zlata's writing is engaging and compelling as she tries to keep her spirits up. Only occasionally does she sound disconsolate, as when her friend Nina is killed by a shell. So here our word is engaging. Now my question to you is, which words do you think could best replace engaging in this context? Could we replace it with charming, with strictly disciplined, with characterized by close examination, or with foreign? Which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought charming is the best word to replace engaging in this context, you're absolutely right. An engaging person or thing is pleasant, interesting, and entertaining. And here, remember, we talked about engaging. We used this adjective to describe Zlata's writing. Zlata's writing is charming. It's interesting. It's entertaining. It's charming. That's how Zlata's writing was, and that's why her diary became a bestseller. Not only because of the facts and because of the things she talked about in her diary, but her writing is engaging and compelling. So, that was the word engaging. And within the same context, we also talked about another word, and that is disconsolate. Disconsolate is spelled D-I-S-C-O-N-S-O-L-A-T-E. Now, how did we use that in context? Let me remind you again. We said Zlata's writing is engaging and compelling as she tries to keep her spirits up. Only occasionally does she sound disconsolate, as when her friend Nina is killed by a shell. So, our word is disconsolate. Now, which word could best replace disconsolate in this context? Do you think we could replace it with coolly unconcerned, expressing a choice, extremely depressed, or devoted to a cause? So, which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought extremely depressed are the best words to replace disconsolate in this context, you're absolutely right. Someone who is disconsolate is very unhappy and depressed, sad beyond comfort, inconsolable, disappointed, dejected. And that's how she felt. Okay, occasionally, not all the time. Her writing was engaging and compelling most of the time in her diary, but occasionally she sounds disconsolate, and you can't blame her. For example, when her friend Nina is killed by a shell. Now, you can't expect her to be all positive after her friend is killed by a shell, but she sounds disconsolate only occasionally in her diary. But our word is disconsolate, and you understand what it means. Depressed, sad beyond comfort, inconsolable. That's our word, and we still have 2 more words to go. We still have memoir and audacious. Let's start with memoir. M-E-M-O-I-R, memoir. How did we use that in context? We said, Zlata grows from an innocent child to a maturing adolescent during the course of her diary. She begins self-consciously as a little girl, confiding all to her best friend. By the end of her memoir, however, she has become perceptive and even audacious, as when she scornfully comments on politicians. So, the word is memoir. How can we best explain this word? Can we explain it as a sign or notice for public display? Can we explain it as an act of plotting in advance? Can we explain it as prior claim to something? Or can we explain it as an account of an author's personal experiences? Which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought that we can best explain memoir as an account of an author's personal experiences, you're absolutely right. A memoir is usually a book or article that you write about someone who you have known well. Now, it doesn't always have to be about someone. You can write it about your own life, but it has to be something that you know from personal experience. It is your own account of a first-hand experience, so it's different from biography. You can write a biography of someone's life that you might have known some of, or you might have met this person, or you might have been a friend to this person. And that's fine, but sometimes you can write a biography of a person by just collecting documents and researching and maybe talking to this person or to his family if this person is dead. But when you want to write a memoir, it's a little different. It's not just writing about someone's life or what happened in this period or in a certain place and you've never been there. It doesn't work. Or actually, it's not a memoir. It's just an article. It can be other things, but not a memoir. Remember, a memoir is an account of an author's personal experiences. Whether you're writing about yourself or about something that's happening or about someone else, that's fine. But the point is, it has to be of an author's personal experience. And that's the meaning of memoir. And that leaves me with one more word for today's episode, and that is audacious. A-U-D-A-C-I-O-U-S, audacious. And we use that in the same context, but let me remind you again. We said Zlata grows from an innocent child to a maturing adolescent during the course of her diary. She begins self-consciously as a little girl, confiding all to her best friend. By the end of her memoir, however, she has become perceptive and even audacious, as when she scornfully comments on politicians. So, the word is audacious. My question to you is, which word could best replace audacious in this context? Could we replace it with ineffective, with inaccurate, with bold, or amusing? Which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought bold is the best word to replace audacious in this context, you're absolutely right. Someone who is audacious takes risks in order to achieve something. Someone who is daring, brave, bold. That's the meaning of audacious. And definitely Zlata was audacious, especially in the later parts of her diary when she started commenting on politicians. And I actually quoted what she said, and that was just a wonderful piece she said. Remember, she was a girl when she wrote that. She was not old when she wrote that. But she wrote what most adults wouldn't dare talk about, even today. But unfortunately, it still happens. And politicians, when they want to wage war, they never ask people. They ask their own people. And they consult this mythical balance of power that they have somewhere hidden. And some crazy people in their own circles keep telling them how to kill more people to keep the balance in their favor, or something crazy like that. But anyway, again, I'm not going to talk about war and these things because that's going to take us somewhere else, and we don't want to go anywhere apart from our word power episodes. Remember, this is a word power episode. The story is very compelling, engaging. Remember the word engaging? It is engaging, but of course, we want to focus more on the words. Remember, we talked about 10 words in today's episode. We talked about ethnic, incessant, atrocity, baleful, contending, mean, engaging, disconsolate, memoir, and finally, audacious. So, I hope you enjoyed these words, and I hope you learned something new, both in the life of Zlata, or obviously the story of her diary, and of course the 10 words that you may add to your active vocabulary bank. But remember, if you want to do that, you can benefit from the exercises I created for you, and the link is ready. It's just in the show notes, the description of the episode. Just click on this link and it will take you to the custom post I created on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, where you can practice all these words to your heart's content. And remember, you can do that on the website. You don't have to download, print out anything if you prefer. And for those of you who prefer pen and paper, there's the PDF practice worksheet that you can download and practice to your heart's content. And not only the words from this episode, but the words from the previous 4 Word Power episodes. So I hope you find that useful, and I hope you're still enjoying the Word Power episodes as I enjoy creating them. With that being said, this is your host, Danny. I would like to thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. I will see you next time.